Computer. All right, H for Hustle podcast. Welcome back. We have another great guest today. We have Devin Moreno, founder of Devin Moreno Investing. Devin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. That's awesome.
So Devin, if I was to meet you at a party or a dinner party, what would you say you do for a living?
All right. Well, technically two things. So I
Okay.
still actually have my full time job as of right now.
Uh-huh.
Planning on actually quitting this year.
Okay.
So going full board entrepreneur and real estate investing. So basically, I'm an IT manager for my day job. And then I also have a property management company. I also invest in real estate. And that's something I started 3 years ago. And, never having done it before, to start that 3 years ago. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which is what you're referring to with Devin Moreno Investing. That YouTube channel is kind of tied in with a TikTok and an Instagram as well. But essentially, I guess I'm also doing social media as well. So, but at a dinner party, real estate investor, IT manager,
Got
YouTuber.
it. So what made you get into IT? Were you like a kid that grew up loving computers and loving all of that stuff? Or
No, no. Actually, you know what? It actually started off with me needing a job, and I was a security guard, and I needed more money during a situation I was in, and I was like really struggling with money and such, and I was like 20 years old, and basically one of my friends said, "Hey, look, I know you." Now I knew nothing about IT. Absolutely nothing. I couldn't even. It's funny. I don't watch TV to this day because growing up, I didn't understand the input commands on a TV, so I never knew how to turn the TV on. So like that's how bad I was. I was the kid in high school with the brick cell phone when everyone else had the razor, showing my age here. Uh, but basically, I was that kid. Like I just didn't want anything to do with technology. So friend gave me a job. He's like, look, it's IT, but really you're just barcoding computers. But the job only had like a 3 month time span, and it was a contract, and then it would be up. But I mean, it could pay a lot more. So I was like, all right, I'll figure it out. So I went ahead and did it. And then from there, I started networking and learning how much the IT industry makes. And then I just powered through to get a certain certification, essentially, to continue working for the government.
Got it.
And once I got that, I literally like while everyone else, because it was a very easy job, super
Yeah.
easy. And while everyone else was learning, watching Netflix, YouTube, whatever, I was watching YouTube, but only for education on IT.
Got it.
Just carried for, I don't know, 10 more years after
Got it. So would
that.
you got like an A plus, N plus certification, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Or? Okay.
So the first one I got actually was Security Plus. So I got
Okay.
Security Plus because I worked for the government, and they
Yeah.
require that in order for you to work for them as a system administrator.
Okay.
Then I got the Network Plus and A Plus certifications after that, and was supposed to be working on the CISSP. But now that I'm quitting for real estate, there's
Just
really
what's the
no
point?
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I stopped doing
Yeah,
that.
the CompTIA. So funny thing in high school that was like how I got out of high school was my internship the last year was like pretty much barcoding computers at a hospital, kind of doing the same thing. Like, and I thought I was gonna go down the IT space, and again, very lucrative industry, but I just didn't really feel like it was for me, so I just got out of that really fast. But I mean, I personally like computers. I was that kid that liked to tinker with them and open them. I kind of knew all about it, but it just wasn't something I was wondering about. So you just went in it because what it could do for you lifestyle wise. It wasn't like a passion.
Exactly. I still don't have a passion for it. It now 10 years into it, I'm now the head of an IT division, essentially. You say IT manager, but I'm more, instead of managing a small team, I'm like make all the decisions as far as IT related for an entire facility. Um, but yeah, even now I go home, I'm not tinkering inside of computers, opening them up. I'm
Got
not doing anything special or,
got it. You just push the paper and push the pen, and when you're at work, and then as soon as you go home, that's it.
Yep. Yeah. Nothing to do with computers from that point on.
Got it.
So,
So let me find, how did investing come about? You said it's 3 years.
eh,
When did that, like, were you at work one day saying, you know what, I need to get into real estate? What was the thing that triggered that?
So the two things, actually, a combination of two different things. One of them was it was a life event in my family, pretty big of life event where I'm going to have to kind of skim through it, but
Yeah.
probably not the conversation most prepared for. But essentially, my brother commits suicide,
Oh, wow.
and so basically, the way I was living my life was that of more of a paycheck to paycheck, just sort of partying it up. My lifestyle was definitely not what it is today. It was more about just splurging. I would probably go on like 12 vacations a year.
Wow.
So when I started real estate, I actually had $500 in the bank account. And on my YouTube channel, I have to talk about that. I have $500, which is true. I actually had no money. I had no 401k, no savings, nothing. And when my brother did that, the way I was living my life in reflection of like drinking and just
Partying.
all the partying I was doing, there was a high possibility that my mom would outlive me as well. And so I had to change. I had to reorganize how I was doing things. And so uh, it came across one as that. And like I said, I just want to, we'll just skim through that. But the second part to it was, when this happened, I was at my job and one of my employees I was talking to him about how anybody can be a millionaire. You just need to know how to do it. But, that's the reason, I guess, I was referencing how millionaires, they'll go on those shows where they'll become homeless and then they'll work back up to being a millionaire. And the reason they can do that is because they have the one thing that everybody else doesn't have. They have the knowledge. Yeah, exactly. They know how to do it. So basically it came about as part of a bet. They're like, well, why don't you do it? And I'm like, well, I don't care to have $1 million, but sure, I guess I'll try to formulate an idea. So that became the motivator and driver to change my life in conjunction with the fact that I wanted to do better just for myself, as far as making sure that I, continue on a much healthier lifestyle.
Got it. Okay.
So, that's actually and it's actually, I never have told that part of the story on my YouTube channel yet. I may go into it in the future, but basically, yeah, that's really it. So I started researching, like, all right, how do you become a millionaire? And, of course you get stuck on all the guru channels and all that. If you want to be a millionaire, you got to drop ship or real estate or stocks or whatever.
Sell a program or whatever.
Yes, exactly. No, I didn't buy any mentorships, but it basically, I was kind of like, all right, I've started off on stocks, like most people probably do. And what became very apparent is that in order to really get rich off of stocks, you would have to already have a lot of money or get super lucky and,
hit the right thing or get in really early on something that blew up.
Exactly. And that just wasn't probably going to happen with me. And so I was like, okay, real estate, using the power of leverage. There's a lot of other reasons to like real estate. And I did have the, motivation to learn something entirely new as with my IT career, I'm, brand fresh, but I can say this, it's going to go a lot further because, you may ask next, well, maybe start the YouTube channel. Cause I started the real estate stuff and I realized pretty quickly, you're actually probably not going to become a millionaire just strictly off real estate either. It's actually more of a vehicle for a lot of leverage. I mean, I'm not saying you can't. You can become a millionaire in stocks. You can become a millionaire in anything, really, real estate, whatever. But the way you would go about doing it, collecting houses and collecting rent, you would actually need a lot of houses, a lot of big buildings and stuff. And so I'm not saying I can't do it, but I was like, okay, I need to branch this off into many other things, own multiple different companies. And there was someone who does it on YouTube, actually, who's kind of identifying exactly what I want to do, which I'm eventually creating this into, is Ryan Panada. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Is he a guy from California that like buys real estate? I think I've seen him before.
He looks like, I don't know his ethnicity, but he's basically, he's from Nevada, actually. Basically he has a lot of different companies that he does and he automates everything. And that's actually how I kind of operate as well. I automate as much as possible. And so he actually alone doing the flipping houses bit, like already made a lot of money doing that. And that's something now I've been starting to doing. I'm starting to flip houses a lot more because I used to just only buy and hold.
Okay.
And and there's a reason I did it in that order, but basically, that's what kind of started me on that path. Is I was like, okay, how do I turn a little bit of money and make that actually useful?
Okay. So you have $500 now, right? There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people. I'm gonna go back a little bit. A lot of people listening to this. You have $500. So where do you take that $500 and where do you get a first property to even buy and hold? How do you even work that way up?
So there is some things that I would have to disclose, and this is where it gets tricky because I always talk about it on my channel. It started with $500, and I did, but there was two things that are difficult to mention. Number one is when you buy a piece of real estate, a lot of times you need what's called a cash reserve requirement, which is essentially several months worth of the mortgage on the in
Yeah.
your bank account. I didn't have
Yeah.
that, and so what I did was at the time I put my name on my girlfriend's bank account,
Okay.
and her money became my money.
Okay. So it looked
So
like, okay. Got it.
exactly. And so that was one way I could get the cash reserve requirement. The second thing as part of that is I had a VA loan. Now, that is an avenue that some people don't have, but there are a lot of ways to get around this that I do teach about on the channel. But my VA loan allowed me to put 0% down on the purchase of the property. In fact, I got paid about $1,500 to
Got it.
buy the property.
Got it.
Um,
So I'm guessing you're not looking at very expensive properties. And may I ask, where are you looking for these properties, right? Because you can't go in there and say, all right, you don't have a ton of money. The money that you're showing on your books technically isn't your money. So
exactly.
what kind of properties were you looking at?
So, this is my story on how I actually got this. Not repeatable by everyone, but I do have adjustments on how I would do it for
Uh-huh.
somebody else. So I'm going to preface that I don't want anyone to feel discouraged, like I don't have access to a VA loan. But the VA loan allowed me to buy a pretty expensive property, I'll say, for the first one.
Okay.
Did I go for doing that? No. I think my second property is the more realistic example of how someone else would do this. My first property actually was $400,000, which, depending on where you are in the country, could sound cheap, I suppose, but in most places, that's pretty
That's pretty
expensive
expensive,
property.
yeah.
So, yeah, it was that, and I ended up doing a rooming house within it. Now, keep in mind, I didn't have to buy a $400,000 property. In fact, I often teach to most new house hackers, don't do that. I was a house hacker, by the way. I was house hacking this with a primary
So
residence.
you was living there and
I
then
was, yeah.
renting out like a couple of rooms or like another part of it.
Exactly. So, yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, you use a primary residency loan to buy essentially an investment property, right? You live in one room, rent out the others. There's many ways to do this. There's like 7 types of house hacks that I often talk about on my channel. So you don't have to live with your tenants necessarily. There are other ways to do it, but I chose the rooming house method. And yeah, I rented out each other room. What this allowed me to do was to reduce my living expenses to near zero, or well, effectively zero, since I was getting paid to live where I was. And that was one of the first steps to just reducing all my expenses to as much as possible to zero,
Okay.
to before I moved to the next step. And
Got it.
that's so.
So you lived in one, rented
Mm,
out the rest, all your
yeah,
cost of living
yeah,
reduced, and you're getting paid to live in your own house. So how
exactly.
long do you live there? Is it like, are you like, all right, this is a year, 2 year thing, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna go buy a place for me to live by myself, or you can like
Mm.
continue on? How do you get the second property?
So you have to live there for at least a year, by the terms of the loan. Now,
Okay.
that's the plan anyway. So I did live there for a year. That wasn't the problem. So the second property actually was a complete investment property. Now this is going to be the more realistic take for most people who listen to this, because this one I couldn't live in it, so I couldn't do a low down payment. So I had to do a bunch of other kind of tricks to figure this out, and that's how I kind of looked at it with real estate. I'm like, okay, it's a little bit of a game. Once again, I am not necessarily endorsing everybody do put your name on someone's bank account, but that is what I had done. She didn't give me any money, by the way. She just
Yeah.
allowed me to put my name on her account.
Yeah.
So the second house, all right. So this one, this was cheap. It was a $65,000 house. So
And what market are
this
you buying these in?
Baltimore. Sorry.
Baltimore.
So
Okay.
yeah, Baltimore City. So the $65,000 house is probably a little bit more realistic to what Baltimore is, to what most people will try to go for.
Hmm.
This was a rundown property, needed a lot of work. After analyzing the deal today, if you were to analyze it today, I could already tell you that house wasn't going to work. But I was still new to this whole thing, so it's kind of a weird symbol to me now. But basically, what I did was two things here. One, I got a private lender. Okay, now this is another one that gets very confusing for a lot of
What is this,
people.
like a hard money thing or?
No, actually. So there's hard money and private money. Hard money lenders are generally institutionalized lenders. For those of you who don't know, listen to this. They're institutionalized lenders who will generally buy and give you all the money for the renovation upfront, generally.
Yeah.
There's many other draw schedules and all that. You're going to hear a lot of different myths. But long story short, they'll buy it for you and then they'll give you the money for a renovation. That wasn't what this was. Instead, I had a private lender. Private lender is essentially a person you know in your life who is able to just give you a loan. This lending option is a lot more flexible. However, a lot of people get this confused and they're like, well, I don't know any rich people, so no one's going to give me $50,000. That's actually not true. You know a lot of people. Anybody listening to this, I'm telling you now, you know a lot of people with money. The problem is you don't know how to get them to give that money to you. That money is also not in a form that you're traditionally thinking. You're thinking a bank account. That money's sitting around in a bank. Oftentimes it's not. It's sitting around in a retirement account.
Yeah.
That's most often the case.
401k or IRA, Roth IRA, something like that.
Exactly. And these people, they'll have that money, but what you'll find is that they don't have the money that they want to give. They don't want to give it to you as an individual until you know what you're doing. So me, I spent the first 6 months before I bought my first property. So I started learning about real estate, bought it 6 months later. I spent that 6 months talking to this woman about everything I was doing, teaching her about real estate. And I found that by me repeating it to somebody else, having to teach somebody else about it, it would reinforce the knowledge for myself. And so that's what I was doing. I was just teaching her about it and all that. And then eventually then I was showing this next property I wanted to buy. So I bought my first property. 4 months later, I wanted to buy another one. And then I was starting to talk to her about giving me a loan. All right. Now, she wasn't rich by any means. She only had $200,000 in a retirement account, which I say only, but she's like 45. Like she's not a rich woman. This isn't somebody who, is a millionaire or anything. But I knew she would be able to borrow a certain amount. And I just needed 20K. And so I was telling her exactly how this works, exactly how I'm going to pay her back and all that. I went through this for months with her, really, really just pushing. Because like I said, I felt the same many people listening to this would feel. Well, I don't know anybody with money. My parents were not people with money too. They wouldn't give me any anyway. So essentially, after she felt comfortable and after I was able to explain to her in many different ways how this works, she finally agreed to give me a loan. Now, the tricky part about that is when you do this, it actually took 2 months because when you do this, you have to put the loan in your account 2 months before you actually purchase the property.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is because the bank, if they see that on your bank statements, they'll ask you what it is. And if you tell them it's a loan, that they're not going to like that. So this, once again, goes into another aspect that I struggle to talk about on my channel because it's a trick. If you want to call it that,
pretty much.
It's a hack. Yeah, it is. And so, reasonably, someone with $500 probably should wait to save more money before starting. If I were to go back and tell everybody, like, if I were to think about my YouTube channel, I probably would have thrown around like, I started with $500 so much. But these are the little hacks that I did. And so they're employable by yourself. You can do them. But you remember that I reduced my expenses to near zero, which means that all of my income could be totally devoted to this. I also have no kids, no, spouse.
There's a couple of advantages that you had going into it, and you set yourself up in a way that you were able to have this advantage. So when the bank was looking, they're like, oh, well, he has a really good job. He's been there for a while.
Exactly.
Reputable. Okay. There's 20 grand there. Oh, it all looks good on paper.
Exactly. And
then you already had an asset within the first piece of real estate.
And then I already did have an asset, which was generating income. I could show this rental income as part of my income for the debt to income ratio that the banks use.
Yeah.
So understand that when I got my second property, there were a number of things factoring into this whole thing. At first, I didn't on the channel want to disclose a lot of these little things like, people are going to be like, oh, well, you're breaking the rules a little bit. And, but that is, it's the truth of how it happens. So I'm like, okay. And it's breaking the rules within a very minor way.
This is what they consider creative financing.
Yeah, this is all your this is it's the weird part, but I found the more I dig into real estate investing, I found that what I'm doing is not rare or unique at all, or what I did to start. In fact, advanced investors do the same tricks to buy $1 million properties. They use just in a
Yeah,
scaled up
yes.
way.
There's a lot of people who
So
use a syndicate where they have a group
yeah,
of people collectively put their money in. I had a guy on the show called, his name is Aaron. He has a syndicate and he does the same thing. He gets a lot
yeah,
of doctors and lawyers and people who have way more disposable income to give into his
yeah.
fund. He gives them a piece and he then, buys a bunch of real estate
Mm,
properties in the state of New Jersey. There's millions of ways to do it. And you just
exactly.
used creative financing to get what you had to get done.
And,
So
and I appreciate you putting it that way because that's basically what I did.
yeah,
Just within a lower scale, the bank's not going to look at a syndication as a valid way of purchase. So that's what I had. I had a
yeah,
syndication of one woman
yeah,
who,
exactly.
so,
So then you get the second property, but it's something that you have to
mm,
fix up. With the first one, you
yeah,
didn't have to fix up. So
yeah,
how did you learn that game? Because that's a whole different thing
yeah.
to buy and fix.
That is where this gets real complicated. So for anyone who's doing the math here, I said it was a $65,000 property. She gave me 20K. The reason that's all I need is because I used a bank to finance the rest.
Hmm.
The banks will finance the property through conventional financing if the property is in a livable state. And I say that in air quotes because livable state really means four walls, a roof, and some heat.
Yeah.
And that's really about it. So this thing was pretty banged up. This house, if I were to tell you today how much money it would need to have renovated it, I would say about 30K. I
Hmm.
spent probably more like 60K getting this. And this is where on my YouTube
Wow.
channel, I talk about I got scammed by a contractor, which, a lot of people can relate, I imagine. And I ended up doing renovations that didn't make any sense and, just figuring it out. And this is where I would say what I did was I just watched at least 5 hours of YouTube videos a day on construction and real estate investing and all. Like, I mean, I unsubscribed from anything that wasn't real estate related. I stopped doing, like, I'm a dancer, stopped dancing. I stopped anything and
You
just
just sucked into real
powered
estate.
through
Yeah.
education. And then what I did was here's a trick that many of you watching this, if you're new, want to get into real estate, can try. What I did was, let's say I had a contractor that everyone recommended. Okay, everyone's recommending this guy. He's a great guy. Jake. Jake's the one you want. Okay, well, if I call Jake immediately and don't know what I'm talking about, he's just gonna be like, this newbie investor. I don't want to really deal with this. He doesn't know what he wants. Like, I basically had to build a scope for him. He's probably going to question me on everything. It'll be a nightmare. So basically, I'm like, okay, I need to educate myself. So I first called a contractor to come out and do a free estimate. They did a free estimate and told me, do you want to do this, 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 and this? And I would have the discussion with him. And obviously, I'd sound ignorant and wouldn't know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
That's fine. Never intended to hire the guy, but he leaves. I then bring in another contractor. And using the lingo and language that I learned from the
From the
first
first.
contractor, I then repeated that. So I sounded slightly more educated. This new contractor would ask me new questions, things I didn't think about and whatnot, start bringing up the lingo, challenging some of the things that I was hearing from the first person. Okay, fine. That's great. He leaves. Bring in the third one. Do the same thing. Repeat. 4, 5, 6. I did this up to 12 contractors. And that's when I called Jake, the
Got it.
contractor.
So
And
now
by that,
you're super, you know the language, you know what you're looking for, and you can be a very shrewd negotiator with him.
yeah, exactly. And it felt like a much more fluid conversation by that point because, I mean, obviously he could detect that I was still new, but I didn't sound like a complete ignorant, like I have no idea what I want in this house. And that's really the case with me because I didn't know anything about construction. I couldn't even build you a shelf when I first started this thing. So,
No, I mean that I love that. That's like real true hustle, right? Because I've done this numerous times, exactly similar situation, but I've done it where I've called companies just to find out pricing to see where
mm,
I can gauge my pricing within the market
mm,
structure, right? Because you just do it over and over.
yeah,
And how we learned in our company how to do carpet cleaning
yeah.
estimates, we called a whole bunch of carpet cleaning companies to come to my mom's house to clean the carpets and see what they would do. Call like 6 of them and eventually start seeing they all kind of do a similar thing. They measure
Yeah.
this, they do that. And then what I was doing was just watching them. And once I figured out how they were able to
Yeah.
price everything, that's exactly what I did now. I started marketing my carpet cleaning business and we grew our
Yeah.
cleaning business based off of their knowledge. So that's true hustle. And I love that. That's like awesome. You got to use what you have, and what you have is the lack of information. And you knew that.
That,
And
it's
so you're
just
like, how
being
do I get information?
Yeah, these are the things that like I'm starting to disclose more and more on my channel, but I always felt like, man, a contractor's going to watch this and be like,
I mean, some of them know the
you're
game. They know they're being hustled, and when they get somebody, they hustle them. That's how it all works. Like everybody knows what it is.
so,
If it
luckily no one got hurt in the process,
No, I mean they're giving a free estimate.
So,
Their business structure relies on free estimate. They didn't say I'm not supposed to learn anything from your free estimate. So that's really cool. So you go into the second one. The second one was a process and figuring out how to build it up.
yeah.
You get that on the market. Were you like, because again, you got scammed, so now you're 60 in. So technically you're in this thing for 120, right?
Yeah, it was bad.
Did
My
it even
ROI on this house is
yeah.
horrible.
Would the rent roll even make sense, or did it
The
even?
rent made sense. It was the reason the house didn't really make sense is because if you go, I don't know how many people on this channel necessarily would know real estate, but the ARV, after repair value, was expected to be 110, maybe $115,000. I bought the property for 65,000. After closing costs, you're looking at another like $5,000, let's just say. So $70,000 all in. Now, keep in mind, we're excluding the holding costs of having this loan that my friend gave me. So at $70,000, now let's say this thing needed like, 30,000, which today I would tell you that's what it would need. So 30,000, now we're at 100. And assuming everything goes perfectly well, you're fine, because then you can BRRRR the property. That's another 5,000 in closing costs. BRRRR, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically refinancing it and getting all your money out through a cash out refinance. But here's where the problem happens: you can only cash out refinance up to 75% of the value of the home. So 75% of
60,000.
115,
Okay.
it never was going to work.
Wow.
So I basically was. This is where I really got a lesson in pain of how stressful this can be, because I was struggling. I ended up pulling out another loan in order to float. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing, floating loans around for a while, like using my paycheck and basically living on the edge, trying to pay all of this off. So
Now I can hear my audience right now saying, "How is this guy doing this and still has a full-time job in IT? How were you able to manage that? Like you're managing property between lunch breaks? Like how are you managing this? How are you doing all that?"
So that's an awesome question. This is where I would say this obviously going to depend on your job, on what if your job has you working a solid 8 hours a day plus some overtime, and you are just moving just constantly, then yeah, this is going to be extremely difficult. You'd have to do it like after work, or what I often recommend to people, if you have someone reliable, is partner with somebody who has that available time. I didn't have that available time. My girlfriend helped me a little bit. She worked from home, but she wasn't, spending a ton of time on this. So realistically, the answer to that is that I had a job that I made sure that there were times in the day where I didn't have to do anything at the job. In fact, if anyone thinks back to their normal day job, most people aren't really working 8 hours straight.
Yeah,
Like,
there's usually
you have
lull.
lulls.
They'll lulls periods, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I did. It was the lulls. And as far as phone calls and whatnot, I work in a building that has no phone access. I can't have my cell phone, which for anyone in the DC area is actually pretty common. Oh yeah, I worked an hour away from these properties. For anyone who doesn't know, DC and Baltimore, an hour away.
Yeah.
But basically, I used Google Voice to be able to maintain contact with my contractors and such. It was just kind of in between. This is where you can automate certain parts of it. Like, so the ones who scammed me, but where that wasn't intentional, but they were a GC. A GC is a general contractor who manages it for you. After that, after we ended up firing them and getting in new contractors, we pretty much had to rely on them to just do an honest work. Like, and I know it sounds crazy, like, oh, you just got scammed. Aren't you going to check on the property every single day? So, well, I can't reasonably. So yeah, you're eventually going to have to find someone who.
So how did you go about screening? Because I could understand the apprehension of like going from one general contractor to another. How did you screen better on the second one than you did on the first one?
So, I mean, obviously, after going through 12 contractors, and then eventually I got to the ones that I actually picked, whom it obviously wasn't the right choice because you start to learn a little bit of the lingo. This second one was a reference from somebody else,
Got it.
whom I met in the business a little bit. And then this guy came in, and that's it. The screening process for a newbie investor is going to be a little difficult because you are entering in an industry where they're just going to know way more than you. And there's no hiding it. I would tell people straight up, I'm like, every contractor, I'm like, yeah, I'm totally new at this. Because there's no point. Anyone who's worked a job for long enough, you can tell when
Who's
someone,
green?
you can
Yeah.
tell who's green. It
Yeah.
just takes a couple words, a couple sentences. They'll figure it out in 5 minutes. It's not hard. And so realistically, there is a little bit of a leap of faith. You can try to screen them as best you can, but anyone who actually wants to scam you and knows the business is going to get around all your screening questions. And this is the intimidating part, right? And this is where a lot of people get like, oh my God, I don't want to enter this. There are a lot of good contractors out there. Maybe some of them don't work as hard. Maybe they charge more. There's maybe other variables that may not make them the best, but there are people who honestly want to do an honest day's work as long as you're a person who will pay them on time. I mean, it really is just, I'm trying to think back, like putting myself back in the mindset of it. I mean, I can't tell you there was any trick or anything I did. It was really a leap of faith once again, and me just trying my best to understand this person's motivations. And, you say all the things a lot of newbie investors want to think would work, like, oh, I'm going to have more properties and you'll have more work. And you would think that would be a great like motivation, but it's a little hit or miss more than often than you might think.
Yeah.
It, I'm trying to give them something, your audience, something like, okay, what's that thing I can say? I'll tell you this. If you want to artificially make yourself look bigger, all right, this is something I did. I wanted my contractors to feel like I had more properties, and because it's one thing to say you have more, but it's another thing to actually send them to job sites. But if you don't own any houses, how are you going to do that? Start managing other people's properties.
Got it.
So, and that's what I did. I started picking up like about 6 properties on the side, and I was able to, in the middle of my own renovations, send them to another one and at least give them the feeling that I owned more than I did.
And you have work for them possibly coming through in the future. Got it. Okay.
That. And so that was one trick. If you want to try to appear as a bigger investor, that is a way to artificially inflate your property count.
Got it. So let's go back for 2 seconds, right? This all started because you're telling your coworker anyone could be a millionaire, right? And you're like, all right, now from what we're talking about, you have one house that you're house hacking, kind of living in, another one that you did construction under, and we can keep going about the others that you have, and then you're managing other people. So right, not now, but back then, were you close to that $1 million point that you were talking about with your coworker?
So you're saying right now, am I close to that $1 million point? So
no, at the time where you had 2 properties and you're managing others.
At 2? No, so not at all. Even if you included my job income, I wasn't getting anywhere near.
Okay, got it.
I think at the time I made. So he was actually at the time my coworker, and I ended up maneuvering myself in my job to become the IT manager. So I'm the manager of the head of the division today. But at the time, 3 years ago, when I started this, I actually was just a SysAd 3, which is high level tech.
Yeah.
And no, I was making 80K plus. Then even if we say the gross rents, that duplex, which was the second property, made about $1,700 a month, with a mortgage of $750, and
so like 1,000 and change coming home.
Yeah, something like that, essentially. And the $750, and that's including like maintenance allocations and stuff. So it wasn't even the mortgage actually. The rooming house, because the mortgage was so high, I made a lot less on that than it might sound. So like altogether, it was $4,350 in rent. But the mortgage is still to this day really high. Thankfully, the pandemic allowed me to refinance this and get a much lower rate. But essentially, you have that, and the utilities are all included and all that. So that's a little bit of a challenge because I have an older home, which is not very utility friendly.
Yeah.
And so little challenges like that. So no, I was not. even when you factor in them without mortgages, there's not even coming close.
Got it. All right. So you go from the second one sounds like the one you cut your teeth and you learned a lot
Yeah.
from. So do you go into the third one with the same concept? Like you're still going to try to fix, or you're like, no, I'm
Yeah.
going to go get the
I
next one.
I
Uh,
actually went into the third one even more brutally, and I actually went through a countdown of my first like 7 properties on my YouTube channel. But basically, the third one was a gut renovation. That one needed a lot of work. It was like, but this time I partnered with somebody, and so for a lot of people asking out there, like, how are you keeping up with this? So my girlfriend lived with me in my first property, my rooming house. She helped me manage that rooming house. The second property, I was figuring it out from work, just kind of coordinating one contractor. Now we have a third property entering the mix. Plus, I'm starting property management stuff, trying to get properties that I kind of manage on the side. It's getting a little tricky.
mhm.
So I need to figure out some way to be in 2 places at once. And what I did was I partnered with somebody on this next deal. And actually, I found I'm partnered with on someone on half of my deals, and that helps me manage these properties. Because as of right now, I manage 11 properties plus I own 12, and I still have my full-time job. So that, like, I need partners, right?
Yeah.
So, and people who work with me. And there's a lot of elaboration I could make on that. But essentially, my third one was a gut renovation, completely down on the studs, going all the way up. And that, I'll tell you this, it's my desire to challenge myself through things like that is the reason I skyrocketed so quickly, in my opinion, so quickly, going from can't even build a shelf to where I am today, where now I'm buying properties without even looking at them. It was me challenging myself with these harder projects, but knowing how I'm going to get through it. That third property took me a year to renovate. Now, for any of you out there, this gut renovation was a 1,500 square foot, 3 bed, 1 bath, 2 bath row home in Baltimore City. That should not take a year, not to renovate. An advanced investor can get knocked that out in a month and a half.
Yeah.
So basically, it took me a year because of money. You make mistakes. You're going to pay for those mistakes. So you're going to realize things later on and whatnot. And it became money. So I was floating that through my paycheck and my partner's paycheck for a year.
Jeez. So you literally were like tooth and nail, like fighting to pay for this thing. Got it. And how
Yeah,
many
there
you
was
said
actually a certain point we just stopped. Oh God. Yeah.
so how now how many properties do you have now? You said 11 or
I have
12?
12. I have
12.
11 I manage, 12 that I own. It's a slightly misleading to say own because 2 of them are flips. So,
Okay.
I mean, own, but
You
I'm not
you have them,
going.
but they're going to be
Yeah.
pass throughs and technically
Yeah.
for a bigger for a bigger upsell. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is something that was interesting me listening to your story. A lot of the people who listen to this have analysis paralysis, right? They're on YouTube, they're watching 5 hours of some shit, right? Whatever they're
Yeah.
interested in,
Exactly.
but they don't make the jump. You made the jump. Some people have analysis paralysis. They have all the information, but sometimes having all the information could be the thing that stopped them. What made you take that leap with having all the information?
I made a safe calculation about how much stress and monetary risk I could handle, which is, I first reduced my expense to near zero. And then I realized I'm not going to be ready. And you're not. I'll tell you, anyone watching this, and if you haven't actually leapt into it, I was finally ready to invest in real estate by the time I bought my 5th house. That was when I was ready to invest.
You had 5 houses, and now you're ready.
Now I'm ready. There's like, otherwise I wasn't ready. And what I did was I decided for the first house, I'm like, I have 6 months and then I'm going to buy a property. Doesn't matter if it's a bad deal, doesn't matter if it's a good deal. Now, that can be very daunting to many people. But remember, like I said, I reduced my expenses as low as possible trying to prepare for this, and also reduce my lifestyle expenses, right? Stop going out drinking, stop eating out all the time. I survived on salads, I suppose. And basically just changed everything to make sure I had a bulk of my paycheck ready to go if anything would go wrong here. And then, of course, being having to find people maybe who could give me a loan. But I told myself in 6 months, I'm going to buy this house. That's it. No questions asked. And I'm going to get a safe deal. Too many people out there, especially the newer investors, are like, well, how do I find a great slam dunk deal? You're not. You won't. Unless you get handed it, some, hand me down or something.
The real estate gods open up the door and open
Yeah,
it for you.
I
But
didn't
that
find.
rarely happens. That rarely happens.
at all. I didn't find my first slam dunk deal until my 7th property. Like you're not gonna find it, and because you're too new. Like the thing is, like the properties now that are paying me great payouts now at this point. Like in my next flip that I have under contract now, I mean I'm gonna make $47,000 in a single like payout, and I renovated this property in 2 weeks, and I needed to make a decision in a day. You cannot, as a new investor, it wasn't even a day. It was literally 40 minutes that I had sitting in the car, like analyzing this really quick, because it just came up on the phone, like the wholesaler contacted me, and it's just like that's all that time I had. As a newbie investor, there's no way you're not gonna find it. So what I would say is find a safe deal, and then and just say in 6 months' time, you're just gonna buy a deal, get something safe. It works. It may not cash flow much, like it, maybe 100, $200 a month, maybe. But that's me personally. Otherwise, I don't think I would have started if I was waiting till I was ready. I mean, the way I put it on my channel is how can you ever be ready when you have to know tax law, renovations. Oh, and by the way, in renovations, you have to know the trades of like 7 different trades, like
Plumbers, electricians,
yeah,
GCs, like painters, like the whole thing, boiler people, the everything.
Yeah, you have to understand bank financing and all these different loan structures and debt leveraging and business entities and structuring. There's a reason all these construction workers don't invest in real estate and they just build the house. It's hard. Like it
Yeah.
is. There's a lot to know, and so you learn it by doing it. Honestly.
Got it. So it sounds like just cutting your teeth, no matter, even if you don't know what you don't know, the
Yeah.
only way to learn is by jumping in it.
Just doing it. And here's what I would say to anybody who doesn't feel they can monetarily take on that risk. Let's say you got a family and kids, and you're like, you know what, I'm hearing this, that's great, but I'm not going to put my wife, husband's, financials in jeopardy. Okay, 2 things you can do here. For anyone who's younger, let's start with that one. Actually, you can do what's called rent hacking, which this is a little trickier, but rent hacking is essentially house hacking, where you buy a property, instead you're renting the property and you sublease the house to multiple different tenants. Now you don't have to actually buy the house, whatnot, and that gives you a little bit of management experience and whatnot. Now, that
I've
can be a
done
little
that.
tricky.
I've actually done that before. I
There you
moved
go.
from one apartment to the other and still had that lease. And I was like, well, I'm gonna throw this joint on Craigslist and see who contacts me, because it was a big
There you
enough building that they didn't even pay attention. And for
go.
like 4 months, I put it there like short-term stay, 4 months, because the lease was ending
Yeah.
then. And somebody paid me more than I was actually renting the place for. So that's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
I did it without telling the the
The
building that I was doing
owner.
that. You might
You
have
don't
to
have to.
want.
Yeah, I guess that is a route.
Yeah, yeah. You might want to tell the owners of the place that you're doing that, but if you don't, you can still get away with it.
And you know what? To anyone who's like, you know what, you two are you're willing to bend the rules a little bit. You don't want to do that. Well, here's if you don't want to. What you can do is negotiate with the landlord. You can tell the landlord, look, I'll manage this. I need to sublease it, but I'll handle all the maintenance. Now they may be a little uncomfortable, maybe with the fact that they don't know how you're gonna handle the maintenance, but you just say, look, you don't got to pay for it. I'll deal with that, and then it gives you the exposure to contractors and all of that, and to the actual financials of it. That's just a route you can go, or you can go that route and just not tell the owner.
Bend the rules a little bit.
Bend the rules. You know what? If it's not obvious by now, I probably would have bent the rules. I'd have been like, oh, well, the place is still fine. You're still getting your rent. So the second thing I would say is with the advice I gave earlier, if you're really worried about it, then you can start managing properties. At least figure out, can you handle this without without quitting your job. Yeah, exactly. Like, can you handle the tenant placement? Find maybe a family member, friend, or whatnot who just happens to own a property. You want to help manage it or whatnot. Maybe they're willing to take a chance because they don't want to manage it themselves. This can be tricky because some people might be concerned about who you might put in their house. But if you can find that, then there you go. Manage the property. Do it for cheaper.
Yeah, I have a friend that actually did that. He built a property management company first, managed other people's properties. And what he did with that, he built a Rolodex of contractors and plumbers and electricians and everyone that you needed. And then he eventually started buying his own properties. And by that time, he already knows everybody. He has a trust with them. They've already gotten paid from him. So they understood that whole thing. And then he was able to use them to help him within his property, and he learned the language and the lingo and everything else that's needed. And again, he was still getting paid as a property manager, so he had that funding coming in as well. So
Exactly.
that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, usually I ask people, about making that transition, which you didn't. You've built streams of income for yourself, right? 11 properties, you're flipping. You do a YouTube channel. That's another source of income. It might not be the greatest, but still
Yeah, it's
source
kind
of
of small right
yeah,
now,
yeah,
but
but source of income nonetheless. How close are you to that thing now with your
the
coworker? That
millionaire.
yeah,
So I am now at last count, it's basically a little over 250,000 a year.
okay.
And so quarter of the way there.
Well,
What would have to happen at this point is to take it into scale. What is happening now is after I flipped two properties, I'm flipping this one that's 47,000 profit. And then the second one, and it's going to be also about a week's worth of work, and we're going to make probably about 25K. And what I'm finding now is the biggest thing in my way is my job, and
because
taking it to
you're losing time. That 40 hours
exactly.
you're giving away now is like you need it back now.
Exactly. And that's what's getting really in the way. So I think the reason I haven't become I've done my education for 3 years. And at this point, it's more about, okay, get those
Scale.
40 hours back. So what I've been doing is I've actually been taking a week off of work here and there, just burning through my PTO. Because a lot of people are like, oh, use your PTO as a payout. No, in fact, to be honest, like I'd rather get paid to learn this other craft. So I spent a week where most people might spend on vacation. I'm going to go ahead and spend it learning this thing. So I've been working with these contractors, general contractor and his group, and I'm be partnering with them. And we're just going to churn through. I mean, the goal, and we've already went through all the math of it and everything. The goal is now we're going to flip 3 houses a month minimum. And we're just like literally sale, 3 houses a month, which means if you know how the logistics of real estate works, that house was purchased 3 months prior to that, at least. So, that combined with the YouTube channel, combined with the property management business, now I'm going to be picking up 75 units to manage. I already have an employee. Kind of, I trade real estate knowledge,
Hmm.
and she then manages my tenant management software. Now I'm training her on that, and she's going to be then acquisitions by getting that. I'm trading a lot of that, by the way, trading a lot of experience that I've gained. I have 2 kids who manage my TikTok and Instagram channel, and those should, over time become other sources,
Hmm.
um, and trading, once again, real estate knowledge for that. And basically, based on the property management, the flips, based on the real estate income, because I actually treat that as a separate thing, honestly, the
Hmm.
buy and holds. It is 2 separate entities doing it. The YouTube channels, the Instagrams, and all that. And then eventually, me and another partner, actually the original partner who I did that gut rehab with,
Yeah.
we're writing a book. So it's a book on house hacking. And the reason is because I actually found all the books that currently talk about it only talk about one way to do it. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
and
there's
there's
like
multiple ways to do it.
tons of ways. And I manage 6 house hacks. That's a business that I picked up as well. I manage rooming houses for people, but also other different types of house hacks that people have, because a lot of times the problem with the house hack is they'll move into them and they want to move out. And so I manage those, and I have a ton of experience on house hacks, like a crazy amount now at this point. I find that I'm like almost a leading expert of it. Like, I'm like, I've been doing this only 3 years, but so yeah, we're writing a book, so that's another stream of income, and it just keeps going from there. And if I call back to that guy Ryan Panada, who I told you is like doing exactly what I want to do, if you watch him, you'll see where this is potentially, hopefully, going to go. It'll be like 11 companies that all bring in this. So
Nice. It's really awesome, and I really love that because you didn't really quit your job and you went into something knowing that you're building, and you stretched your job as much as you possibly could. You probably
yeah,
your work productivity probably dropped a
it
lot.
did.
Yeah.
It did.
But again, I tell people sometimes the best way to build a company is by having a job, having a stable income already coming in, because to build something and not have any streams of income,
Yeah,
that will drive your life
it
completely crazy.
hurts.
Yeah. So we got a couple more questions, then we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
has entrepreneurship changed your life for the better and the worse?
So for the better,
I know you're
I
not fully there yet, but
yeah.
you're pretty much in it.
I mean, I would say the amount of, like, I don't call it a confidence. I mean, my life has been, as I mentioned earlier, the partying lifestyle and all that run. Anyone who's actually done that before can attest
It's
to how it can get
exhausting.
old. Yeah, it is. There's a certain point where it's like, what am I doing? You get a little lost, and it's not a, it's fun, you're doing it, but you kind of like, from one high, not high in a drug sense, but like in a life, so, the
Yeah,
party
it's
sense.
you're literally going from a party to another party to keep that feeling going, and
Exactly.
it's exhausting. And when the party's over, your body just hurts and recovers for the next party to come back around.
And this has been so much more fulfilling, and it's
Got it.
a really cool feeling when you're doing it, and you feel like it. You know what, I'll say this, for anyone who has a purpose in life and all that, is driven, and you already have what you're set at, and it's like, okay, why do entrepreneurship? There is a really cool feeling knowing that if I stop now, if I just stop right now, I'm 32 years old. In 30 years, my properties will all be paid off. All right. Just, I don't invest in anymore. I don't buy anymore. I just stop now. I will be making like all of that income now on these properties. And this is assuming rent never goes up, for 30 years, unlikely.
Impossible.
So, my retirement's set. Like,
Yeah.
not only is it set, but I'm making way more now in retirement than anybody else would have made. And it's set. And the only reason that this is hard work for me is because I keep expanding. If I
Hmm.
stop doing the flips, stop, trying to acquisition more or anything, most of my houses are now renovated in a point where it doesn't really require any effort. They're all basically new stuff. So, so it's like minimal.
Yeah.
So I find that even if you're not trying to be a millionaire,
It
you
will
know,
happen eventually.
it's like you'll retire happy, so
Yeah.
and worst case scenario, you sell a house or two and then make a couple $100,000 all of a sudden, so basically, but yeah, I would say for me personally, entrepreneurship has given me a direction. It's improved my life, certainly, in that way, giving me a lot more confidence and feeling like, I hate saying this because all the gurus say it, but adding a value back, I guess you can say.
Hmm.
It- you know uh, it's interesting to note that now, before, what I did when I helped people, drink and have fun, is I give them a cool night, I guess. Now I have permanently assisted someone in living a better life, and that's
Nice.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, I'll admit that that's kind of cool, but that direction and purpose made me
So
happy.
how has it changed your life for the worse? Because a lot of times
Yeah.
people don't talk about this side of entrepreneurship. They
Oh
just show
yeah.
you the Lamborghinis and the life.
Oh yeah, I meant to get one of those. I gotta put that in the background. So, the worst. All right. So, very, very much so. It is extremely stressful. You need to be able to. There was a point, and the first time this ever happened to me, where a tenant actually broke me, and I was so stressed out about all these different things. I mean, when you have a maintenance request or something going on, or every decision you make it can lose you a lot of money, and not only you, but people who work with you, partners, your tenants. If you don't handle that situation correctly, they're without heat, they're without water, whatever's going on. They are suffering because you made the wrong choice, or I, in this case. And you make enough wrong choices, and they'll start biting back at you in a way is very painful. And I think I actually broke down and cried. And I'm not a person who even cries. It was the first time I actually cried because it was just a lot of stress. And I know it gets easier. This is kind of the weird thing about real estate. Your first house is actually your hardest one. This is only going to get easier for me as time goes on. But what ended up happening was just a weight of the wrong decision. And you know that's a side that's like, it's going to happen and whatnot, and you just go with it, you roll with it. But my partner's actually learning that he hired the wrong contractor. Now we're
Hmm.
way over budget on one of our
Yeah.
houses. And I told him, I'm like, hey, it's not a problem, because he felt bad. He felt terrible. He's like, man, I shouldn't have. I feel like this is all my fault. And I'm like, look, man, it's going to happen again. We're good. Like,
Yeah.
we'll survive the next one.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to hear that. He's like, nah, we're never going to make sure this never happens again. I'm like,
Like
dude,
it's impossible. It's
it's going to
impossible.
happen
Yeah.
again. It's all good. And you just, you know that it always works out. Like it'll definitely work out over
it's
time.
it's almost
So
like you grow a callus to bad decisions, and you
yeah,
grow a resistant, like, all right, cool, I just learned, what do I learn from this? Now let's
yeah.
keep on going. That's really cool,
So I'll
because
say those were yeah.
I
Oh, sorry,
actually
got it.
did a YouTube video about that and a blog post about that.
Mhm.
Like, the three things that I learned from being the three things I wish I knew from being an entrepreneur. And one of those things is just making all the decisions. Like, no one tells you, like, yeah, you own all of it, but you also own every decision you make. And those
Yes,
decisions have effects on other
consequences.
people. Yeah. You make one decision, your tenant goes bad, now then your bookkeeper has problems, now this, now it's like a trickling effect. Your partners are affected, everything's affected, and no one talks about how much those things are daunting. And making one decision, and because you made a bad decision, you might have made three great decisions all week, that one just eclipsed all the
Yeah,
three great decisions.
exactly.
It doesn't even matter, but you got to keep on going, because
Yep.
the only way you get to those strings of good decisions is by making a
Mhm.
bunch of bad decisions. So,
Yes,
and that's
and
the
that is
thing that,
very true.
yeah, that's the one thing I wish somebody would have told me, like, yo, all of it's on you, like everything. And it's gonna
Yeah.
affect so much people. uh,
Actually, at that last point is actually accountability, which you just said, all of it's on you. But that was another thing I told my partner when my partner was like, man, he's like, none of this was my fault. That's what he said. This contractor that kind of ripped us off a little bit, and he didn't rip us off in a scam type of way. But long story short, we went way over budget, and I said, no, it is your fault. And I'm like, the more that you can almost blame on yourself, the more that means you can change it.
yeah.
If it's not your fault, then there's nothing you can do. You're
Yeah.
just a victim to the circumstance. But if it is your fault, then
Then you know
there's
what you
something
can
you could
learn.
have done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, so what could we have done different? And in his case, it was he paid the contractor too quickly, which
Wow.
is a whole nother story. But
Yeah, that's a whole
but
nother
that
skill.
was so
So there's a lot of guys on the internet that are gurus, real estate gurus,
yeah,
Grant Cardone's, the Max
yeah.
Maxwell. There's a ton of guys, right? They always say real estate is the best way to grow wealth, blah blah blah. It's the best thing to get into. Everyone should do real estate. What is your opinion on that?
So real estate is a very powerful wealth building tool. I don't think it's as scalable as a service industry, or at least not in the beginning. It's very difficult. So this is where I say, like, if you own a cleaning business, for example, you really have to specialize in kind of that one lane, and then you can repeat that. You just get more clients, maybe bigger, maybe it becomes banks, and eventually becomes firehouses and then corporate offices and whatnot. And you just keep scaling that one thing. And I'm not saying, employees and all that factor in. This is this is definitely you're finding a commodity that fits a certain type of metric, and then you're acquiring that and making it fit this mold. It's not, I'm not saying it's not scalable, it definitely is, but it is a lot harder to become a millionaire with it, in my opinion, than a lot of service industries where it really is just providing that service and finding the people who need that service. Um, it, it's, I think, okay, so to answer bluntly about the Grant Cardones and them, they have a vested interest in you entering this field, and or at least listening to them for whatever their purpose. Grant wants you to join his syndication, and some of the other ones, they want you to buy their mentorship course and whatnot, because they know it's hard and eventually you're going to need a course. So I think that you can, it builds wealth. Here's what I would say for most average Americans, where I'm at right now is probably exactly where you want to be. It's at a point where my retirement's set. I make enough cash flow off my rental properties that now I can quit my job.
Mhm.
I'm fine now. And so I think for that purpose, real estate is fantastic. If you want to build it to more than that, then you need systems and companies and processes to do that. That is a whole different operation. It's possible, but it is probably harder than they're making it sound like. Um,
You're gonna cut your teeth a lot more than you think.
exactly. I mean, I try not to give too much. I know these long-winded answers, but I feel like they do deserve some explanation. It's like it's hard, and so that's where I would say, if you're going to join into real estate, I would just say, like, okay, just figure out what you want. If you don't want to become a millionaire, that's fine. Honestly, four houses can change your life. Like, and that's really all you need. You don't need a whole ton of these. Like, if you have four pretty decent deals and whatnot, you'd be surprised how much that does. Just from the four ways real estate pays you: tax advantages, appreciation, principal pay down, and cash flow. it can do a lot.
Yeah, and then in a
Over
couple of
time.
years, in the sense you'll like you said, your retirement will be set, your lifestyle will be a little bit better
Yeah.
than you were, and maybe you like your job and you don't really want to quit. You just want
Yeah.
something to sustain you on the other side. So the name of the show is H for hustle, right? And everyone has a different definition for hustle, right? For me, hustle means work ethic, and that just means even if you're not smarter, you can outwork most people if you and being able to outwork someone gives you an opportunity to get somewhere, right? What
Mhm.
does hustle mean for you?
It's funny actually. I don't even use the word very much, so I actually don't. A personal definition of it probably would mirror what's kind of close to yours, which is you know it's a work mentality, a drive. The only reason I would like to preface that though, like you definitely need to know how to do what's smart too. I often say this to people. I'm like, it's not just all about hard work. It's working smart too, figuring out exactly how this can be done. Hustle. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. Short answer, I'd have to mirror yours. It's doing what you need to do, like
Yeah,
how I downsize everything that I'm doing, just for a brief period of time. 3 years, we'll say. What's that in the grand course of life? And then
nothing.
and just working through this. And now my life's set. Like I said, I could stop. So it's like I would say that hustle is just drop everything else and then push toward that one goal, whatever it takes. I mean, just in the smartest way possible, I would say.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm not excluding smarts. Smarts does
yeah,
help, but I do think a lot of work ethic can teach you how to be a little bit smarter. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to make a ton of mistakes
yeah,
along the way. You will,
yeah.
but because you're working so hard and so fast and so quickly, you're going to learn faster than most people who are taking their time trying to be super diligent.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Um,
sorry I didn't have a better answer to that.
no, no, no,
I
no, no
wasn't.
problem.
So,
Again, so if people want to reach out to you, if they want to learn more from you, if they want to follow you, where should they go?
well, I mean, I guess the easiest place is if you want to reach out, Devin Moreno Investing at gmail.com. You can, if you want to make sure the email is accurate, then you can go on my YouTube channel, Devin Moreno Investing. Once again, it's going to same on Instagram, same on TikTok, Devin Moreno Investing. Any of those places you can reach out to me, and I respond to everything actually. So that's a whole nother thing. So, but yeah, that's probably the best way to reach me.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for dropping knowledge and talking
Mhm.
about your journey. And I also one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because again, you didn't quit that job. You figured out a way to balance both until it became critical mass where you couldn't do one anymore.
Mhm.
And that's I think that's what a lot of people should do. But again, it's up to them. And I wanted your perspective on how to manage that as well. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on the show.
All right. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right, and I will link all your links to his YouTube, Instagram, everything in the description. So just check it out in the description. You guys will be able to link up to Devin. Thank you so much again.